thank you. Welcome to eDay. All right, it's a real pleasure to be here in Amsterdam. I don't know how many of you know, but my family's originally Dutch, 200 years ago, so I'm afraid I don't speak any Dutch. But what I'd like to do today is to give you a tour of what I think is happening in changes in industry. Business models are changing. So I want to give you a tour that lasts about 30 years to show you how things have changed over time. And I want to do a couple of, we'll visit a couple of successes and we'll visit a couple of failures and see if we can examine how things have changed over the past several years. What I want to start with is something that only happened last week. And if you see the release of the Interbrand list of the top global 100 brands, this was just last week and it introduced some fascinating data. For the first time since they've been keeping records, a consumer products company was not in the #1 slot. Coca-Cola, which had been in the reigning position for the past 13 years, had fallen, I guess I'm being chased around, had fallen from the #1 slot to the #3 slot. I feel like I'm being adjusted like the Borg.
Yeah, okay.
Is all set? Thank you. Okay. These have been supplanted by Apple and Google. What's also interesting is if you look at the fastest growing firms, it's Apple, Google, and Amazon, and then Facebook was at number 52 in the top 100. For a company that's only started within the last decade, that's extraordinary. The CEO also mentioned something that's quite interesting. If you look at the ad spend of Google, Google buys almost no ads of its own, yet children can say Google it and know exactly what you mean, even though there's been no TV ad that they've seen. It's a complete distinction from what's happening with Coca-Cola that has this massive ad budget. They also point out that 10 of the top 30, actually I see people taking pictures, these will all be on SlideShare later if you'd like to get them, but 10 of the top 30s they illustrate as technology companies. I'd like to reinterpret their data, in fact, and actually argue that 12 of the top 30 are technology companies. Platform companies. We can consider firms like eBay, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, others as platform companies, not just technology companies. The platform companies are really taking over, and it's not just branding, it's also in value created. If you rank order all of the companies in the United States, it turns out 3 of the top 5 in terms of market capitalization are also platform companies, with Microsoft joining the ranks of Apple and Google. It's really quite extraordinary, and they have been moving up and displacing the energy and finance firms that have held those positions for decades. It's really quite remarkable. If you plot the top 20 firms by market capitalization for more than a decade, since about 2000, there's a rise of platform firms among that that's extraordinary. You can actually see the increase in value created by the platform firms. What's happening? Well, one of the things that's happened is that the product business model is broken. One of the best examples of this is, of course, BlackBerry. I don't know how many of you had BlackBerry phones just a couple of years ago, but if you look at the market shares, only 4 years ago, BlackBerry was at almost 50%. Half the market. But in 4 short years, they've fallen to only about 2%. It's a remarkable unraveling. I don't want to just pick on BlackBerry, though, because it's really a product issue. If we go back that 30 years, if we look at Apple in 1980 to 2000, Apple did the same thing. Steve Jobs launched the personal computer revolution, yet Apple didn't profit from it. It was a beautiful, tightly integrated product with the best fonts, best design of everyone. But it was a closed, tightly integrated system that didn't innovate in the same way as the other products. In contrast, Microsoft opened its ecosystem, got 6 times the number of developers, and then got this exponential growth in its market capitalization in the period 1980 to 2000. Matter of fact, if you look at it, the red line on there is the market capitalization of Apple. In medical terms, it looks like flatline. In fact, this was Business Week was predicting the demise of Apple at that point, and when they polled CTOs and CEOs on how they would fix it, Michael Dell had opined, I'd shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders. My, how things have changed since that time. Now, certain companies actually deserve a call out for the success of their product strategies. Nike has a consumer product. What could be more of a consumer product than a shoe? And yet Nike has actually been managing to convert this to a platform. Take a look, for example, at what they've done with adding sensors to the humble sneaker, and then adding the Nike Fuel Band in a way that actually does data capture. You can use this, connect it to your cell phone, and start doing benchmarking to improve your health. They also offer to help you create social communities, to connect you to your peers, engage in competition, and build groups. Matter of fact, if you play your cards right, Nike promises to connect you to this Nike community. Right? I'd like to be a member of that community. It's really nicely done. The point is, Nike has been very successful at turning a product into a platform. So if we look at communities, what is it that it is required to become part of a platform? One of the things you need is a function that can be embedded into other people's products. So in Nike's case, they're doing data capture and social benchmarking that can be added to other people's products. If you look at Apple, it was iTunes that was the key innovation, not the iPad. But iTunes was the platform for getting data, apps, and music onto the device. And once that was possible, others could add to the device and increase the value. The wonderful German software company SAP does enterprise resource planning. That can be added to functions for finance, for logistics, for HR. This becomes embedded in an ecosystem of tens of thousands of other contributors. You need functions that can be added to others. Products have features, platforms have communities. Here are two communities. Any idea how these two columns are related? These names are almost all taken, by the way, from that list of Interbrand top companies. Any idea how these two are related? No one in the front row volunteering a hand. All right. Each side attracts more of the other. So imagine, for example, in eBay's case, you get more eBay sellers attracting more eBay buyers. More eBay buyers attracting more eBay sellers. It's the same thing on LinkedIn, for example. As you get more job postings, people who want work go to that. And once there are people who want work, people come with job opportunities. In banking, it's the same thing. The more merchants that take American Express, the more people are willing to carry that card. The more people carry that card, the more merchants are willing to accept it. It creates a positive feedback. These are the mechanisms that create this growth or create this decline. When Google launched Android, they offered millions of dollars in prize money in order to get folks to build apps for Android. That brought in more developers. The apps then brought in more users, folks on the Android ecosystem. More of the bigger, larger market brought in more developers. The cycle repeats. Google has been brilliant at then stemming this across different ecosystems. So it's in search, it's in YouTube videos, it's in map functions. They allow you to embed their search capability in everyone else's product. It's that function that is embeddable, and it's creating an ecosystem. So that's the first part of our tour, which is kind of what's happening. I'd now like to see if we can give a description of why it is that platforms are so successful relative to products, why products have such a hard time. We'll see if we can go through a bunch of examples and see how it grows. And we'll start with Apple. It's interesting that when the iPod was introduced, Steve Jobs was doing the exact same thing he did in the 1980s and 1990s. It was a beautiful device. It was the world's most expensive $400 hard drive. This was pre-iTunes. It was a linear supply chain. Users would load their own music. You could actually get the music from a store or maybe from a P2P file sharing system, stealing it. And there were no network effects. If you put anything on your MP3 file and device, it didn't necessarily attract others. Steve Jobs then did something really clever. The iTunes store, for getting stuff on the device, allowed them to intercept the retail channel. In intercepting the flow of the information, they also intercepted the flow of the money. This then allowed them to create a new kind of relationship. In fact, notice it's gone from a linear supply chain to a triangular relationship. It's also got the feedback. Jobs was the first to get all 5 record labels onto his platform. This massive amount of content meant users wanted to join that platform. With a large user base, more folks want to add content to that user base. So you get the positive feedback. And most importantly, you get this triangular relationship where Apple owns the choke point, and they now get this 30% tax on every developer app that's sold through that ecosystem. That's one of the reasons their value has been going so much Others are helping them create value that they get to charge for that isn't part of their own innovation and licensing. Compare this to the products of other companies. Nokia has a great phone. Sony had the best gaming individual device. It's tailored even to the commands on both hands. Microsoft Zune, the features were every bit as good as the iPod. What happened when Apple introduced the iPhone? You could do instant messaging, you could do browsing, you could do calls, you could do games, you could accelerometer on there, internet access, put books on it. All of this content was suddenly on one device. How is a game, the PSP, going to compete with something like that? This enormous ecosystem is providing massive amounts of content that added value to the device. There's also a common data platform allowing you to do analytics across all of these things so you can recommend different products. Notice Sony could have done this. Sony had an e-reader. Sony had cameras. Sony had a great MP3 player. Sony even had Sony Time Warner. They could have done it, but they didn't. Google is not making this mistake. They are creating that connected ecosystems we saw just a moment ago with the embeddable functions. So what happened when Apple introduced the iPhone? Nokia's stock price went in 2007 to $6 today. Sony from $53 to $20 today. Microsoft Zune? Gone, right? The product doesn't exist. We don't have to stop there. If you look at the Polycom speakerphone, you can run Skype off of your iPad. And that's not even an ecosystem, that's just a standard linear product. If you look at the Cisco flip camera, crushed. If you look at the HP calculator, you can get a perfect emulator of the HP calculator on your iPhone for $2. You don't need to buy one for $20. If you take a look at the TomTom GPS or Garmin, if you take a look at Flickr photo sharing service, embedded that into iPhoto. If you take a look at the RIM BlackBerry, each of these things is a product that has been crushed by the platform. Now, it's worth pointing out, these companies are run by incredibly smart executives. The point is, the rules have changed. Ecosystem strategy is different than product strategy. Amazon isn't being killed by the Apple ecosystem because it has all of this functionality, Amazon Web Services. It connects the data streams across all the different services. It's got 19 million movies that you can download through its content. The reason the iPhone isn't killing the Kindle Fire, it does everything the other one does except make calls, unless you add Skype, in which case it actually does. So one of the things, I teach in a business school. So in a business school, we teach lots of different things about marketing and finance, R&D strategy, how you do innovation planning and internal organizational design. So let's see how it is that things are different across once you move to a product strategy. One of the most fundamental is pricing. So everyone's familiar with getting access to Facebook for free or Google for free, or Google subsidizes the Android developers. Is that an ad strategy? Are they selling ads to developers? Or in a credit card company, if you pay your bill at the end of the month and you take advantage of the frequent flyer points, you're getting subsidized. But it's clearly not worth ads in the insert. What's happening? I'm going to argue that free pricing, which is endemic on the internet and in platform strategies, has two different models, and most folks don't understand the difference. We need to see if we can figure out what's happened in order that we can take advantage of it. But I'm going to say everyone actually has the right intuition. So my favorite example of this is a bar in Taiwan, the Brass Monkey. So suppose that we are trying to set up a pub. A pub is a kind of market. So here's a question for you. So if you're setting up a pub, who gets the discount? The guys or the girls? The girls, right? Guys, I'm sorry to tell you, it's really not us. The girls are the ones that they really want to bring in, right? So the girls are going to get the discount. This same bar uses this insight in a new way when it has English speaking night, right? So who gets the freebie on this one? The English speakers or the non-English speakers? The insight is that what they're doing is they're giving away the freebie to one group in order to attract and charge more to the other group. You're giving the freebie to the side that is the stronger magnet. That's very different than traditional pricing. Everyone understands in free the razors and blades strategy or the mobile phone strategy. The razor you get for free, and then you get charged extra for the shaves, the blades. The mobile phone, they'll give you the device for free, and then you have to pay for the cell phone minutes after that. It's the same person. That's different than two-sided network pricing. In that, you're giving away a subsidy to one group in order to charge more to the other group. Google subsidizes developers in order they can charge users for the apps. Credit cards give away free points to credit card holders in order they can charge more for the merchant side. It's different, right? Guys, we've got the ones that have to pay for the beer. The unfortunate thing here is that lots of folks, if you get this wrong, you can wind up subsidizing the wrong side, and that's when organizations lose money. You have to be very careful about understanding the distinction between these different types of pricing. The next thing we have to do is you have to figure out how to unlock spare resources in the internet economy. So how many of you have stayed at something like an Intercontinental or a Hyatt or a Marriott? These are fabulous hotels. They've got linen sheets. They've got concierge service. They have restaurants, sometimes with fine chefs. How do you pay for all that overhead if you have a weekend when no one stays there? Right? Inventory, it gets to be hard to manage. In business schools, you often talk about just-in-time inventory or things like that. To compare that to Airbnb, which is this service where you can list your spare room. So if your family has a villa in the French Riviera or something on the Greek Isles, you can list it there. Airbnb has zero carrying capacity for that. What is their inventory management cost if that goes unsold? This is giving fits to the classic hotel industry because they can't compete with this spare capacity industry. The same thing is actually happening in automobiles. Relay rides will allow you to rent your car for up to $1,000 a month, tapping its spare capacity. It used to be the case that we'd be teaching about just-in-time inventory. Here, it's not even mine inventory. You're renting out someone else's resource, creating a marketplace in these products. Another thing that we have to do is you have to capture information wherever it comes. So Instagram is a good example of a company that's capturing information from around the globe. Instagram sold for $1 billion. It wasn't for the contributions of the 13 employees of Instagram. It was for the contributions of the 30 million people contributing. You have to position your product to capture the information rain that's being created by mobile devices and other parts of the information economy. To give you an example of that, anyone recognize this set of photos? 2005 to 2013. Ah, yes, what is it? It's the inauguration of the Pope, right? In 2005, it was the inauguration of Pope Benedict. In 2013, it is the inauguration of Pope Francis. So look at the difference in data capture in just 8 years. It's extraordinary. Instagram has positioned itself to capture all of that extra data. Our ecosystems need to be able to tap this extra data. Incidentally, this same period corresponds with, so although Instagram and Facebook are growing exponentially, this same period corresponds with a fall in a factor of 3 in the stock of Nokia and a factor of 4 in the stock of BlackBerry. We need to capture the information as it's happening. Another element of this, we need to change internal organization. Under a product strategy, you would have a product manager or a brand manager. You could operate as independent business units. You can't do that as a platform anymore. You have to be able to see across the whole ecosystem in order to create the complementarities across products. We talked, for example, that Sony had a great MP3 player, great e-reader, even had the video services, but it was operating as a virtual Galapagos of holding companies that weren't talking to each other. So for fun, I'm going to give you a Galapagos map. This is an actual map, and we're going to populate it with different divisions from the island of Sony. Here is the island of Sony Music, right? Up with the blue-footed boobies is the island of PlayStation. Over on the bottom right is the island of Sony Pictures. In the middle is the island of Sony Computers, and then also on the far right is the island of Sony Finance and Insurance. These companies don't talk to one another. The logos don't even look the same. Rumor has it that it was easier for Sony Music to talk to Apple than it was to talk to Sony Computer. You have to have complementarity across the divisions if you're going to create those platforms. Compare this to how Jeff Bezos is running Amazon. Bezos has a platform mandate. All teams will expose their data. All teams must communicate through common interfaces. And in fact, if you and I are in the same company, within Amazon, we have to use the same interfaces, and it's better than that. Someone outside Amazon gets to use the exact same interfaces as someone inside Amazon. This means its products can be embedded into other people's products. Go back to that function that can be embedded in other people's services. Anyone who doesn't do this, out. This is how you can start to do the correlation between customer who bought this book, bought that golf club. You might never have noticed the correlation, but their data services allow that to happen. What else changes? Something else we need to do is we need to open our ecosystems to third-party content. We need to make sure that we can capture ideas where they happen. A wonderful investor from Silicon Valley is Marc Andreessen. He built Mosaic and founded Netscape. He's on the board of directors at HP and eBay. And he says a platform, you know you have a platform when it can be adapted to the countless needs and niches that the platform's original developers didn't even contemplate. So let's give you some examples. I'll give you some historical examples of that. So here's a bonus feature. I said our tour covered 30 years. This will actually go back 100 years. So this is going to be the Ford Model T. Ford Model T was one of the first mass-produced assembly line products with interchangeable parts. Those interchangeable parts allowed it to be embedded in other people's innovations. So here are innovations that Ford never anticipated. This is the Ford Model T hay carrier. This is the Ford Model T flour mill. This was the Ford race car. He might have considered that one. He probably wanted that one. But he didn't anticipate the Ford mobile church, the Ford snowmobile, the Ford sawmill, and my personal favorite is the Ford goat carrier, right? Each of these are innovations brought by the ecosystem. Each of these things add value, all right? Open your ecosystem in ways that other parties can help you out. Does openness work? This is a chart of accesses to MySpace and Facebook over the period 2004 to 2008. The top line represents MySpace. Now, anyone know what this first bump is in 2006 in the blue line for Facebook? Anyone recognize that one? That one is when they first opened their ecosystem from universities to .com. That was the small bump they got. You know where the real action happened? That's when they opened their ecosystem, they created the APIs, and companies like Zynga were formed. We got Farmville, we got Mafia Wars. People are spending more time on the ecosystem, and they're inviting their friends to participate in the ecosystem. That's where you're getting the exponential growth. That's what's really happening. Does it matter? This is a quote from the founder of MySpace. He was trying the 1980s strategy of Steve Jobs. We tried to do everything ourselves. In fact, we should have kept the 5 or 10 things and stuck to that and let the ecosystem do everything else. Let me show you. Let me illustrate that in a way that try to drive it home. This is a platform. This is the long tail diagram of what it would be if you simply sorted the value of different apps on a platform. If this were Windows, it might be Word, PowerPoint, Excel. If it's Android that your mobile phone comes on, it's the stuff that comes preloaded on your phone. You must own the stuff at the head of the distribution. That's where the initial value is being created. But the stuff on the long tail, the mistake is you don't need to own this. I don't know how many of you saw the Apple ad where you can hold your iPad up into a stars and it will show you the zodiac. Apple didn't build that. Apple didn't even conceive that. It's a great example of innovation brought by the ecosystem. But there's another critical point. For each failed experiment, how much do you pay? 0. For each success, what's the upside? 30%. Wait a second. Your R&D department, can you get that out of your R&D department? 0 cost failure, 30% upside? That's amazing. That's what you want out of your R&D ecosystem. That's what an open innovation platform can do for you. Here's another way of trying to say the same thing. If it's the case that you had an R&D budget and you had a slope that looked something like that, consider product innovation. Even if you double your R&D budget, you can tip that slope up a little bit in terms of the value add to your platform. Open that and let third parties help you out. Their complementary ideas and their complementary resources added to yours goose that slope. Even if you start from behind, it's a mathematical certainty that you will pass given enough time. That's another reason platforms beat products. You really get these innovation ecosystems that really help you out in novel ways. One other element is that industry structure changes once you shift from products to platforms. How does the best resource get identified initially? Well, usually it's by expertise. We're going to be shifting more toward meritocratic crowds, or rather shifting from a handful of experts to the wisdom of crowds. I'll give you some good illustrations of this. The Beatles were discovered by Brian Epstein in Liverpool. Justin Bieber was uncovered on YouTube. You could argue about taste in one or the other. But the fact is, one helps to identify what is going to be a popular bit of content. Another example of this, TripAdvisor is a great place to aggregate travel reviews. No travel agent could possibly know as much as the aggregated wisdom of the entire marketplace. TripAdvisor is then a great place to go gather that information content. Or it used to be the case that TV executives might predict what was going to be a popular show and tell you what time you're going to watch. Now you can predict the successes based on YouTube. Another interesting example, I don't know how many of you have seen the company Threadless. This is where designers submit their designs for competition. The crowd votes on them. Threadless only produces the ones at the top. You've already been told what are going to be successes. You know for sure those are great products. The crowd is helping you define and create that. So it's a new way of actually gathering the information and doing business. So we've taken a tour that shows that things have changed. We've looked at 5 different ways in which business models are changing. What's next? I actually think that there are going to be structural changes in a number of different areas. One of the ones I think is most interesting is government. This is one done by a friend of mine who actually spoke with the government of Singapore, and he got all the data on shipping, all the data on mobile phone service, all the taxi stands, the weather reports. He created this common data layer in which others are allowed to build apps, and now you can start to visualize the daily lives of the people in your city. You can reroute taxis from one area where there's high density rain, from where there's no rain to where there is rain, in order that you can actually optimize the flow of the city. It's an ecosystem adding value, making the city a better place, much like Android ecosystem or that kind of a platform. Energy markets. This is another whole industry that's going to be transformed by platforms. One of the greatest problems in energy production is when you hit peak demand. At that point, you either wind up getting brownouts or blackouts, or you need to bring on extremely expensive new forms of power generation. Ways to solve that are decentralized power capture from things like solar panels,